The WWF, what the world is watching. Turn it on and rip the knob off.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Wrestling Memory Grenade. Now at episode 199, and I'm feeling fine. This is Ray Russell growing ever so close to that next 200 number and milestone. But this week on the Grenade, it is all about June 1989 in the World Wrestling Federation, talking news and results. And we're going to have another special guest here to join us this week for the program. He's a longtime wrestling super fan, longtime loyal supporter of WrestleCopia, and I hear he does a mean Jesse Ventura impression as well. Please welcome onto the program for the first time ever, the one and only Mr. Matt Crowder.
I've been to the Super Bowl. I've been to the World Series. I've even been to the Rolling Stones. And there's one event that surpasses them all, and that's the Wrestling Memory Grenade. Here we are, Ray. I'm fired up.
Now I'm fired up as well. Matt, welcome to the program for the very first time. And that is up until WrestleMania 17. That was my favorite WrestleMania, my favorite pay-per-view to go back. I think it's because the Ultimate Warrior wins the title. I think it was because all was right in the world in regards to the talent that they had at that point in time as well. But I don't think I've watched any event more than WrestleMania 6. So now that fires me up as well.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for having me on.
I don't even know what I'm going to do when I get to WrestleMania 6. I might lose it myself, but it's going to be a great time doing that. But right now, man, we're back here in the summer, heading into the summer here of 1989, man. Were you a super fan at this point, Matt?
Yeah, no, well, me, the lovely 7-year-old that I was at actually I was 6 at the time, but going towards 6 going on 7, watching the TV here and there, you know, it's funny enough for the dying days of the AWA, which, you know, I'd missed out on most of, and then I guess in some cases, thankfully, of that, because 89 and 90 were not great years for the AWA. And, you know, this time period for me was always big because Savage and Hogan was so big, and many other things that I loved about 1989. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about No Holds Barred, you know, everyone's Oscar-winning, you know, production by Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. And, you know, it was just a big time to be a wrestling fan. And it's funny because, you know, we always think of the build-up to WrestleMania 3, or the Rock and Wrestling, where it comes to War to Settle the Score, or even, you know, a Brawl to Settle It All in 84, which were the kind of two big points of, you know, national expansion, plus, you know, obviously Hogan and Andre at WrestleMania 3, but this time period's actually fairly decent. I will say when it gets into the summer, it kind of lulls and then picks up a little bit into next month, but it definitely is one of my fondest memories as a fan. You know, this time period is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, no, when I look back, I think peak era WWF for me as a kid, I'm 8 here in June. I won't be 9 until August. And I think my peak era, though, I always say is like Survivor Series 88 through WrestleMania 6. Like there's just like this year and a half run straight where it's just like peak talent. They have everybody you could possibly ask for, except for whoever's left over there in Turner. But I mean, they pretty much have everybody. It's a who's who. We get matches we thought we'd never see. We got the Brainbusters here right now. Arn and Tully working the WWF talent, if you will, for a year. We were very blessed as wrestling fans, as kids in this era. And so I look back at this with more fondness than any era in my whole entire life of watching professional wrestling, I think. Now, I love the territories, but I didn't grow up in the territories. So that's more of a learn and just kind of going back and just, I can't say fond memories, but just fondness of seeing all these guys before they become what they become and the guys that predated them and things. But here, I remember this stuff very, very well because I lived it and it was on my TV. You talked about the AWA. And no matter how bad it got, it was still on my TV on every Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. on ESPN after I got home from school because it was wrestling. If there was a ring, actually, they probably didn't even need to be a ring. And they told me it was wrestling, I was going to watch it, man. And that's kind of where I was. And certainly here locked into the WWF. What I wasn't locked into, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, John Paz will kick my ass for this if he ever finds me, but No Holds Barred is released right around this time. Very timely because we're right around that time here in 2026. But back on June 2, pal, No Holds Barred was released at the theaters. And so I did some digging. I went back into the Observers, went back into some other rag sheets, brother, and I pulled up all the information I could find in regards to the business that No Holds Barred did here in June of 89, man. Now, before we get rolling, your take on No Holds Barred, the first time you saw the movie, were you excited to see it because it was wrestling related? Were you a Hulkamaniac? And then fast forward as an adult, have you ever watched it again? Those are my two questions for you.
For me, I did not watch it when it came out. I mean, I always remember the WrestleMania 5 bit where Jesse just goes completely nuts on Hogan stepping into Hollywood. Let me tell you something, Hulk Hogan, and goes through the whole spiel. And I think I saw it probably maybe a year later. I didn't know what to think of it because it was just so different, at least for me, because it's like as a wrestling fan, you're just like, okay, this is what you expect. But definitely was a Hulkamaniac, and I'm at the total opposite of you when it comes to WrestleMania 6. Like, I bawled like a baby when Hogan lost. Like, it was when my brother got the pay-per-view, I was devastated when Hogan lost. But back to No Holds Barred, I mean, it was, and I didn't know until later on, as I got more and more knowledge and everything else, Stan Hansen and Bill Eadie being like, who are these guys? I'm like, who's this big fat guy? I'm like, oh, it's Stan Hansen. And then, as you get older, you're like, why did I feel that way? And also at the same time, it's like, things you miss. But totally, like, as a kid, it was okay. And then as an adult, it's, let's just say some substances were probably consumed in between, let's just say, writing of the first draft and to the last draft.
I don't know that there was a second draft. The story goes Hogan and Vince wrote it overnight. One night they locked themselves in a hotel room. I wonder what they were doing. And they were up all night writing this movie. And it looks like a movie that was written in one night, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, rip 'em, and then the kind of, let's just say, the one bit where it's his friend and he gets hurt and then he's like, I'm going to take him, brother, and, brother, and I'm just waiting to see what the end of it is. And it's like, yes, Hulk wins at the end, but it's funny you mentioned 1989, because like right now, in this time period of all the movies, like the huge movies that were beforehand, like a weekend before was Last Crusade. Then we're getting into Batman, which, with the Tim Burton Batman, and a bunch of other movies, which, in UHF, for all you people that are Weird Al fans, there's lots of, which essentially died because of, Batman and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because those are two big. You have an iconic franchise, which is his third film, and then you have the new thing on the tongue. Because I remember that for my birthday. I think it was my 7th or 8th birthday, having the Batman symbol on my birthday cake, and I'm like, that was a big thing. So I mean, the TV is hilarious looking back on it now because of how much they hyped it, and getting all the reactions from the people coming out of the theater. It reminds me of The Condemned when I went to WrestleMania 23, where they get everybody else. Because I was there, and I'm like, I watched the movie, and I'm a little bit older, and I'm like, it's all right. But, getting the people going completely insane for a soundbite or two because, they're on camera and everything else. Just, but as far as it'd probably be a good rental if you maybe didn't want to pay attention to the story, but as if you're looking for anything but a throwaway, it's worth your time, at least once.
I remember I think it was my cousin who rented it from Blockbuster shortly after it was released. We didn't see it in the theater. We saw a couple of those other movies you were referencing that were released around that time, though. So I remember going and seeing some of these other movies, but not No Holds Barred. But we did rent it, and it was fine. I think my cousin was more into it than me, not because it was Hulk Hogan, just because, I don't know, I wasn't really into it. But it was okay. As a kid, I was like, yeah, that was a movie. But as I got older, I go, oh, this is terrible. When they would air it on USA all the time and things like that. And I'm like, I can't watch this. And I probably didn't watch it for 30 years, maybe. So, I mean, I'm guesstimating here, but until just recently, and I encourage anybody out there, if you haven't done so already, if you're not part, try to subscribe just even for a month to the Ultimate Tier at our Patreon, because me and John Paz go back and we do it Mystery Science Theater style. We go back and watch the entire movie from beginning to end. And it's a lot more fun watching it with a buddy and talking about it as you're watching it than it is just sitting down watching. We really had a blast. We got a lot of great feedback on that as well. So we're looking to maybe do that again with another movie down the road. But that was the first time me sitting through the entire movie, probably since childhood. And it was okay, again, because I had somebody to talk with and hang out with while we were doing it. But I don't know if I could just sit down and watch that on my own. Certainly not a cult classic to me. But back in this time period, you referenced it. We've been covering it on The Grenade. Vince is talk about free publicity because you already have programming. Every segment, there's mention of No Holds Barred, whether it's commentary, whether it's interviewing fans in the crowd, wrestlers promoting. I mean, Ultimate Warrior's telling you to go watch No Holds Barred. I got when Demolition did it because Axe he's Jake Bullet at the beginning of the movie. But when the Warrior did it, I was like, the Warrior watches movies? What's that about? So everybody's promoting this thing. It's huge, and Vince is just killing it there. So if you're a wrestling fan, chances are they're going to make money off you. But no matter how hot wrestling is here in '89, it's still not going to be enough to, become a mega blockbuster on its own, this movie. So they're going to do what everybody does when they have a movie coming out. They're going to hit the media and press push. The week leading in, so everybody's making the rounds. Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. June 2nd, when it's released, they're on Friday night videos promoting No Holds Barred. Hulk Hogan appearing on the Arsenio Hall show that week on Memorial Day, the evening of. Vince McMahon even does David Letterman that week. And I want to read something here. This came out of The Observer. I've never seen this. If anybody has this, please post it, send it to us, let us know. I'd love to dissect this and actually view it by myself. I've seen all the Arsenio stuff. I have most of that on video. But this Letterman appearance of Vince McMahon leading into No Holds Barred, this is what Meltzer had to say. He said McMahon had David Letterman rip him a new asshole, so to speak, on the Letterman show June the 1st, Thursday night. McMahon was pretty much ambushed by Letterman and made a fool out of, apparently since David Letterman has this pet game of trying to piss off the NBC brass, which can't fire him because his ratings are so high and he's such a cult favorite in his time slot. So David reportedly used McMahon to get the NBC brass, which McMahon is in bed with, so to speak, particularly Dick Ebersol. So again, I've never seen this. I don't really know what he's referencing here. Kind of odd because Letterman was a wrestling fan. We know he's had Hogan on there before. He's had Andre on there. He's had Jerry Lawler, of course, and Andy Kaufman. So it's kind of peculiar that he said Letterman gave it to Vince here. But at the same time, have you ever seen this, on YouTube or anything like that? I don't know anything about this particular segment, but I'm very interested to find it.
Yeah, no, I didn't see anything Letterman related, I think, with Vince until probably the late 90s. But I think at this time with Letterman, I think he just like the wrestlers probably a lot more than Vince, because definitely, grew up a Dick the Bruiser fan. I think I couldn't imagine if him and Bobby Heenan were on like the same show or for a couple. I think that happened later on, but for the most part, imagine that. The Lawler segment is priceless with Andy Kaufman. Sure. You can't buy that for all. And even if you go back to the Mr. T one just before WrestleMania, the first WrestleMania, where, he kind of gives it to T, he's like, just give up the chick. It's okay. And T just wouldn't play ball. And right. It's absolutely awkward, but funny because, at that time, outside of Johnny Carson, you couldn't go wrong with David Letterman. David Letterman had a great, great show.
No, I really enjoyed Letterman as a kid, even though I really didn't know what I was watching, but I really latched on Arsenio. He resonated with me more. He was just younger, I think, is what it was. And I kind of related to some of his guests more because they were sometimes some of the younger new singers, the new hits, the new, actors, things like that as a kid. But Letterman was fun. And I somehow in the back of my head, I envisioned some sort of a New Year's baby segment where Vince and Letterman were working together on a New Year's skit or something. I don't remember what it was. I'm sure somebody will remind me. But that had to have been, I want to say, back in the 1980s as well, but earlier than this time period. So I'm going to have to go flush that back out. But right now we're going to look at the numbers, right? I mean, they put some money into this thing. We're going to see what happens here at the box office. June 2nd, the weekend of, first week of No Holds Barred, Titan Sports falls, they come in at number 2 in the nation, grossing nearly $5 million on 1,300 screens. Don't get excited, guys. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is in its 3rd week at the box office and still number 1 with $21 million. Now, they just make their debut just barely. They're not even reaching $5 million. Indiana Jones on his 3rd week, $21 million. So, I mean, Harrison Ford's doing well right now in 1980. Well, he was doing well before that, but we're going to go ahead to the 2nd week. No Holds Barred grossing now only $3 million, still on 1,300 theaters. But that comes to less than $2,200 per screen for the entire week, which isn't really that good, but we're up to about 8 million. They've made 8 million. They've made their money back, I think, or they're just about there, actually. Then we're going to go to the 3rd week. No Holds Barred, week 3, 1.6 million at the box office, still on all the screens, but in the number 7 slot in its 3rd week out. And Meltzer says, as of last Monday, the movie had topped the $12 million mark in overall business, which means they broke even. If you believe Wikipedia, they spend about $12 million. So into week 3, at least they broke even. They're going to make a couple million by the end of this thing.
How? That to me, I'm like, if you look back at the movie, it's like, I didn't think they put $12 million into that. If that's the case, I'm like, unless inflation was completely insane at that point, I mean, good Lord, that's crazy to me that they broke even. Because I'm even looking at the numbers, I'm actually kind of surprised about how much they actually pulled in.
Well, I think about New Line Cinema. I'm sure they did everything right, even if the movie wasn't correct. I'm sure they did everything proper with the union and whatever else they had to do on the side there. And so I'm wondering if that's just a very expensive part of it, right? So I don't know if this is counting. I don't think when they talk about expenses, they don't count ad expenses. I think that's a separate thing. But yeah, it's very interesting as we move into the 4th week now. No Holds Barred, number 10 overall for the weekend of June 23rd to the 25th, grossing a measly $808,000. Puts it up to almost $14 million, though, after the month. And I think they'd only spend around 12 on it. So they do make a couple million at the end of the day. Now, of course, once they pay everybody out, I don't know exactly how that works. It's considered a major flop overall. And that's when I wrote in my notes, and me and John were talking about this on the other show, because it was fun at the beginning of the show. I put a bunch of trailers on there of movies that were out at the same time as No Holds Barred. And I mean, you're talking, and you named the 2 big ones for me: Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the final in the original trilogy. Batman, I went and saw that. I remember being there for that one with Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton. Star Trek V for you Trekkies out there. I was not a Trekkie, but even I know The Final Frontier. So I know that was a big one. You're talking Ghostbusters 2, which I didn't think really lived up to the hype. But again, as a kid, it was a Ghostbusters movie, so that was huge to me. I'm not a Dead Poets Society guy, but I do know the name of the movie, which means it was probably a slight success. I, as a kid, did go see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is underrated. If you guys want to watch something you've never seen before, I like Rick Moranis. And fucking Roadhouse, right? I mean, Roadhouse comes out here in June of 1989. What an era for movies. First of all, when I look at this is like within a 1-month span, these movies that I'm reading came out. This is insane, man.
Yeah, no, 89, the summer of 89. And here's the thing, you go into next month. Actually, funny enough, I was on Facebook and I ended up screenshotting this. So we'll even go into July. Lethal Weapon 2. Weekend at Bernie's. License to Kill, the last Bond movie for Timothy Dalton. Then you're going into Harry Met Sally, Do the Right Thing, and, the for all you horror fans out there who are big Friday the 13th fans, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Jason Takes Manhattan, even though it was in Toronto or British Columbia or wherever they shot it. Yeah,
it was, I believe it was Vancouver. My God,
Vancouver,
train wreck that train wreck that movie is.
There was never a movie I wanted to see more, though.
Well, absolutely. Well, when you're that age, I mean, at that point, I mean, different age where, I had seen probably Friday the 13th Part 6, the one of them late nights where you're definitely nothing is on and you're not willing to go to bed, and the parents went to bed to like, I'm going to do something kind of sneaky, and this is what we're going to watch, and you're scared poopless for about literally half the movie, and then you're like, okay, and then when you're a little bit older, you're like, it isn't so bad. It's kind of funny now, but no, but it's an insane period. Yeah, Batman too. I mean, soundtrack by Prince. Batman was almost as big as if Indiana Jones did not come out. Batman was just everywhere. It permeated into everything. Such a great movie.
Yeah, I remember watching it, like I said, when it came out. And some of those movies I saw at my aunt and uncle's on, they were big on getting the pay-per-views. So I saw them on pay-per-view. We rented them at the video store. I saw several of those in the theater. I love the summers because I had an aunt that loved to go to the movies. And every time she took my cousin, she'd call me up and I'd be on my way too. So I saw a lot of movies every summer. And that's why so many of these stick out to me. I literally went and saw a lot of these movies. I did not go see No Holds Barred, though, unfortunately. So it is what it is. But somebody went and saw it. They make a few million, I guess, back at the whole at the end of the day. And we're not going to be done talking about this. I'm sure we're going to continue that build of that story as we head into SummerSlam with Zeus. But it is what it is, and I wanted to make sure we got that out there, kind of overview of what happened here in the month of June. But, man, it's insane how many, just one hit after another, one blockbuster after another. But No Holds Barred, easily probably the bottom of that list. Maybe not my list. I'd probably put Dead Poets Society down there because not my cup of tea. They made us watch that in high school, and I'm like, this is morbid. I'm not really... It's not for me, but
it's it goes deep. I believe Rob Williams won the Oscar for the movie, but I mean the ending is very uplifting and great, at least for me. But I saw it later on in life. Thankfully, I mean, if I'd have been younger, I'd have probably poo-pooed it as much as you did.
Well, before we get too far away, we talked about David Letterman. We talked about Hogan and Vince and Arsenio and all these things. We're going to go back to Arsenio because he was a big wrestling fan. And Arsenio, right here in Cleveland, Ohio, he grew up. So he has that dog pound, the crowd over on the side there. And he resonated to me. I mean, I just love the Arsenio Hall show. I love the fact that he had wrestlers on there. And Jake was a heel, so it had to be end of 91. And they had a tag match on the show, and Jake was on the show, and it was so cool. But back here, he was doing, we saw everybody come through here, from the Macho Man to the Macho King. The Ultimate Warrior has a great appearance on Arsenio Hall. There's so many people. Bad News Brown comes through Arsenio. But June 16th, Arsenio's slated to have Slick and the Twin Towers on the program. And Matt, I don't know if you've ever seen this clip, but Akeem professing to be the first ever Black World Heavyweight Champion. Arsenio loses his mind. The crowd busting out laughing. Akeem got it. He got that gimmick, man.
Yeah, no, I have not seen it, but it does not shock me around that time period with Akeem because it goes so over the top, but it absolutely works for this time period because, it's all over the top gimmicks.
Well, on paper or in the ring, you look at the Boss Man and Akeem together and you're like, how? I don't get it. We've got, Slick, as Boss Man will refer to him at WrestleMania 6, that skinny pimp-like manager, because he can't be a pimp-like manager. And you got Slick out here. You got Jive Soul Bro playing. You got Akeem doing the whatever the hell he's doing, and he's dancing. And then Boss Man just looks like he wants to murder somebody with the nightstick. It's like, how does this go together? But somehow it works. I mean, I questioned it all the time, but as the bell rang, you start focusing on the wrestling and less on the fact that this doesn't make any sense. But I enjoyed the team. I thought they looked like world beaters, man.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you can go back to, around the time they're feuding with the Demos on the house show. So it's after them mauling Shawn and Marty at WrestleMania, why not give them a title shot?
Well, they took one for the team there. The little team was never going to beat the big team ever in Vince McMahon world anyway. It's a good story to tell if you're in any other promotion, but Vince will never allow that to happen. And if it does, look out, because they're going to kill you on the other side. But no, I mean, yeah, they slaughter the Shawn, especially there at WrestleMania. But now they get their title shots all the way through the summer here. I feel like that was a gift from Hogan. I feel like, you worked with Hulk, you worked with Macho, you worked with the Mega Powers on top. You took care of them. You were believable. And now we're going to give you, I mean, obviously it's not the titles, but it's something to do. You at least belong in that scene, that the upper echelon, the number one contender spot. And it's different too. And it's fun watching Demolition play from underneath, play the face in peril against those 400, 500 pound Twin Towers.
Oh yeah, you could have been the brainbusters who got the unfortunate, or in some cases, or some people would say fortunate, to be with the Bushwhackers in 1989. Oh boy.
Well, it had to be a night off, but I don't know if it would be for Arn and Tully, because they come in the ring 100 miles an hour. They gave 100% every night, and to have to force yourself to slow it down and just kind of, go out there, do a couple comedy spots and all these things. And I don't know, I'm sure now you're not going to get the truth of 89 out of them. Now they're probably, oh yeah, it was fun. It was good. They were good guys, but I would have been curious in 89 to hear their take on working, with Luke and Butch, those style of matches, but it is what it is. And we'll talk more about the matches when we get to the results here, the house show portion of this episode. Well, we talked about No Holds Barred at length, but unlike No Holds Barred, while not selling out everywhere, Hulk Hogan versus the Macho Man has been doing great business. See what I did? Unlike No Holds Barred. Great business, selling out a lot of the house shows, guys. Doesn't hurt that while Sherry has been now working the manager of Randy Savage, Elizabeth returning to the road here in the month of June. She's been off since WrestleMania. Liz is back on the road, depending on the day, in select markets, working as the manager of Hulk Hogan. So now it's Savage with Sherry versus Hulk and Liz, at least in the big cities. For instance, I know they did it here at the Richfield Coliseum in Cleveland. And I'm sure they did it, most of the larger markets anyway. Once Liz goes back on the road, I know they do it in Florida. My dad, who was not a major wrestling fan, but he followed this story. Everybody followed this story. And so when they came through and he heard that match was there, he went and saw it. And he told me how Sherry was there and Elizabeth was there. And so he shared that with me. And again, not even like a major wrestling fan. So I think that really added an extra level to it, because I don't know if you've, did a little homework or anything moving into this, but they've been doing the rounds. And if they're just doing one-offs, Hogan's going over. Makes sense. But in most markets, they're bringing it back. And so what they've been doing is Savage has been beating Hogan on a count out due to Sherry and a distraction on the floor. So Sherry's already prominently involved in these matches, and she's taking crazy bumps every night as Savage and Sherry celebrate the count out win. Hogan comes in and cleans house on both of them. So it's really been a blast watching that. But so Elizabeth back on the road, but I don't know. This is peak, right? Where do you go from here? You've told this story for over a year, technically. So where do you go from here? You got to take it while you can get it, the Savage Hogan story here over the summer.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing. This is even with Andre, they stretched it out kind of from 87, even though there weren't many matches. Like you could look back to, you had the cage match in Milwaukee at County Stadium, and then and that's probably pretty much the end. But you had the main event, you had Survivor Series, but they kept them apart. I mean, Savage and Hogan, linked. They were very much married. I mean, you'd have to go back to late 85, early 86 if you were, had the MSG Network or Prism, and watching the house shows where they first were married, and, no one knew about that if you weren't watching in those markets. Yeah. But it's so insane how long that went. And funny enough, it even goes into 1990 because they do the third main event with James Buster Douglas, and after him knocking out Mike Tyson in Japan, and they had to make a U-turn, and it still drew halfway decent. Granted, it's the kind of diminishing returns. You go from Hogan, Andre, and then you do the Mega Powers exploding, which did a little bit less, and then you go to the main event number 3, where it goes down a little bit, but also you had a little bit of, let's just say, breaking news when it comes to other sports. I mean, I can't imagine Mike Tyson going through being a world champion still, and how he would make appearances later on, later in the Attitude Era. But they were so locked, but they were so good together. They were like peanut butter and jelly. They were always fun to watch. You didn't feel gypped or cheated, whether you're a Hogan fan or not. They were good, entertaining matches, and you can't take that away from them.
I feel it had to, and you know how much of a perfectionist Randy Savage was. We always hear the story about the 18-page he wrote for him and Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. We hear about Randy putting every move down and quizzing Ricky like page 3, line 27, and things like that. And it's kind of crazy to think about it, but he knew how to put a match together. And it had to kill him at WrestleMania 5, having that severe staph infection, but refusing to sit out. I mean, biggest payday, I would have to imagine, at least until he got to WCW. God knows what he had thrown at him there. But in the WWF, I would have to imagine, had to be the biggest payday of his career up to that, certainly up to that point, and maybe the entire time he's working here in the WWF. Highest buy rate. And highest grossing WrestleMania, the buy rate stands until the Attitude Era as far as pay-per-views go, WrestleMania 5. But Savage with that staph infection, very limited for Randy Savage standards. Normal guy, great match. Randy Savage, man, I can only imagine what he wanted to do. And you get a taste of what he probably wanted to do on these house shows. The staph infection's clearing up now. He's doing a whole lot more than he did at the pay-per-view. And it's fun. It's like, okay, we saw them at Wrestle, but this is the next story, the next layer. And it's like you said, they just gel well. So it's okay. Yeah, you're going to beat it to death eventually. But for right now, to me, it was like WrestleMania on tour. We got to see it on the pay-per-view. Now we get to see it live. But I wanted to be there. Well, you can be there, guys, when they come to your town next. So they're selling out LA. They're selling out in Oakland. They're doing a tremendous job. I think they do 12-5 in Boston. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But one place they're not going to be working, unfortunately, is Madison Square Garden, which is currently under renovations for the entire summer. MSG scheduled to reopen in September. So it'll be the fall before the WWF returns to Madison Square Garden, unfortunately. So right now in the MSG network, they've been airing shows from Nassau and Meadowlands. So kind of crazy to think about it. But I mean, obviously, you can't really do anything about it. The business is under renovations. However, it's crazy to think you got the biggest feud in the history of wrestling, perhaps, up to that point, Savage and Hogan, and you can't even put it in the Garden. But they've been there before, so I guess not the worst thing in the world. Yeah,
what's interesting about 88 and 89, if you look at it, most of the pay-per-views are Northeast centric. Even I'm putting Cleveland. I've had a good time on Turkey Day, even in Cleveland, if you can imagine that.
Fuck you, Jesse.
It's funny putting Cleveland in the Northeast here because they didn't move from there. Because I'm wondering if they ever even thought about putting SummerSlam 89 in Madison Square Garden, because obviously they were in the Meadowlands for SummerSlam. Right. And it was just very weird. And to me, another, I think, big what if. Imagine Hogan and Savage in a stadium instead of Trump Plaza. Think of it like Hogan Orndorff from the big event in 86. Yeah. Look at that and how much more money that they could have generated, and take away all the high rollers that were probably in Trump Plaza, and then you add more wrestling fans to that. Yeah. I think that would have probably even been a bigger record, and you got more people in there. Is it going to be? It could have been, I would say, close to probably Hogan and Warrior in Toronto, even though Toronto is Bizarro World and has, a voracious appetite for wrestling, and has a very big affinity for Hulk Hogan. I mean, if you look at WrestleMania 6 and WrestleMania 18, that's pretty much your biggest thing. But I mean, it's really, really, it's insane about where they kind of just were there, but then they took the show everywhere else and it was doing great. But big pay-per-view events and TV events were just pretty much centered in the Northeast, even though they're doing gangbusters everywhere.
So this is kind of deceiving, too. When you look at the crowds, they're doing big numbers, they're selling out, and not every arena, like I said, but a lot of arenas. But honestly, when you start looking at the numbers, this begins the slow decline. Everybody wants to blame the Ultimate Warrior. To me, it was, you took your shot. WrestleMania 5, and it peaked. And from that point, even if it was a slow decline at first, at that point, nothing is ever as good as it was. And the house shows going in weren't even the best. honestly, going into WrestleMania. So it kind of started before the big match, and it's going to continue afterwards. And we're going to see that. The ratings are going to slowly fall. The buy rates are going to slowly fall. The house shows are, once you get past the Hogan Savage matches, because the other house shows are doing okay numbers. But once you get past this summer here, it's pretty much downhill. And again, it's a slow decline, so it's not noticeable immediately, but it's more noticeable next year when there's a bigger drop off, and then the following year, and it just gets worse and it just gets worse. So basically into the mid 1990s for sure. But here in 89, I mean, to me, they could do no wrong. I mean, the Red Rooster, of course I was a kid, but even the Red Rooster, I was a Rooster booster, man. So it's just, it was great times to be a fan. But of all of the talent that's here, there's always room for more, man. It's like Jell-O, as they say. And as noted at the very end of the May News and Results episode a few weeks ago, the time has arrived for the Mac and Dream Dusty Rhodes, baby, made his way back to the WWF after all these years. Big Dust initially debuted at the end of May as a much-needed fill-in for the currently in trouble with the law, Jake the Snake Roberts. Imagine that. Big Dust going to continue to work Ted DiBiase for the entire month of June here as a fill-in for Jake, as the Common Man vignettes have not began airing here yet. They will start here in the month of June, though. I'm looking forward to those and discussing those in the weeks to come. But at least based on the Boston crowd's response, which we're going to discuss here in just a moment, I actually just posted these clips on social media before we started recording. They're going to be out there by the time this drops. So everybody go back and check it out on my social media. The Boston crowd losing their minds on the surprise return of Dusty Rhodes pre-vignette.
Yeah, Dusty at this time, funny enough, I mean, this is my first kind of introduction to Dusty, because of being a younger fan and not being able, even though I do have vague memories of my first match, which was Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair in the cage. I think it was from the Bash '86. I think locally they somehow found a way to show it syndicated in probably one of the clip shows that they probably had locally that I probably just happened to watch. But, it's Dusty. I mean, I know a lot of smart fans at the time were so over Dusty because of how much he had pushed himself in Crockett, and then just was unceremoniously dumped for taking the spike from the Road Warriors because apparently we wanted the Road Warriors heel. It's just Dusty had it. His kids have some parts of it, if you look at Dustin and Cody today. But, I mean, Dusty, shaking his ass, doing, my polka dot! Major motion pictures and sitcoms, baby. Bull in the woods, Jack. And, you can't get away from Dusty. I mean, I think everyone has a halfway decent Dusty, because there's always a saying, where he dresses down Big Bubba, don't do shit you don't know how to do. Don't do shit you don't know how to do. And I think everyone has like their Dusty in them. But at this time period, it's funny because, I mean, some of the people that are in here, Arn and Tully, who pretty much left. Well, Tully, I mean, was, I think, tired of Dusty probably more than Arn was. But
Ronnie Garvin specifically, too.
Exactly,
I mean, not that Ronnie's high up on the roster, but
right.
Still he's in the locker room.
Yeah, and he left after his heel turn, which to me is one of the most odd things in 1988 NWA. And he's coming back, but you can tell he has the power, because obviously a lot of people, the Boston went apeshit for him. And, he's just a common man, and Jesse would probably, he's just a common thief. Where he stole the boss man's nightstick. It's later on in the year, but after a while, I mean, Dusty's infectious. Just son of a plumber, living on the end of a lightning bolt, and whatever connotation or phrase you want to use for Dusty. But he's Dusty. Dusty has this charisma.
People are going to find out here as we begin to cover this. I think a lot of people who didn't live this era or didn't really pay attention deep into this era, they just feel like Dusty showed up one day and he had polka dots, and that's simply not the case. That was and not the initial plan that came later. So we're going to see Dusty do these common man vignettes. We're going to see Dusty out here in some tie-dye trying to sing Johnny Be Good and whatnot against the Honky Tonk Man. And like you said, he's going to be working with the Boss Man. But at some point along the way, he'll get the polka dots, get that over. He'll get Sapphire, get that over. And I've said it, I've said it repeatedly as of late here on the program. Easily, the only human being on earth that could have easily, without even trying, he would have got that Red Rooster gimmick over. Had he came in and Vince said, "You're the Red Rooster," and Dusty agreed to it for some odd reason, he would have got it over. Everybody would have been crowing. Everybody would have been remembering it completely differently. They would have never said, "Boy, that killed Dusty's career," because he would have just got it over, man. He'd have been out talking about my Rooster Booster and all that good stuff, man. I'm telling you, Dusty Rhodes could have gotten anything over. He
had the alliteration, which Terry Taylor did not, even though Terry Taylor before that was halfway decent. But when you have that natural charisma that Dusty has, it's easy to get the most ridiculous thing over than it is for probably, I would say, your run-of-the-mill worker or person with, dare I say, lack of charisma.
I'll go along with that 100%. And Dusty would embrace whatever they handed him. And he wouldn't just do what they asked him to do. He would embrace what they asked him. I think that was the difference between him and Terry Taylor. And no, I'm not defending Bruce Pritchard and his cockamamie shit where it's Rooster didn't embrace it. That's why the gimmick didn't get over. Nobody was getting that shit over except Dusty Rhodes. But I think that was it. That was the thing. Terry did strut around and he did do the head gimmick and he did dye his hair and he did a fucking chicken wing for a finisher and scratched at the fucking floor and all this stupid strutting and all this and crowing and talking about fucking barnyard friends. He did everything they asked him to do, but he did it like he was being told to do it. He really didn't feel it. And I still don't know that he would have got it over because Terry Taylor just doesn't have that kind of personality. Great worker, but that kind of personality takes a very special guy. And that's Big Dust. And we'll go see him very soon with that $1 million smile, just like that. And he gonna come in here, darling, and he gonna come and get it over. But Dusty right now, he's just filling in for Jake Roberts. So perfect timing. You lose a top talent. And they used to say Vince, anytime somebody went down, anytime somebody couldn't make it, his motto was you replace that talent with someone of equal or higher value. And boy, did they luck out in the fact that Jake's down and they just happened to sign Dusty at the same time. So it was great fill in. But speaking of the Snake, while he's forced to sit at home anyway, until the assault charges against him are resolved from December, Jake Roberts finally decided to have that neck surgery we've heard about. He had it done here right around this time frame, and he claims the injury stems back to that Honky Tonk Man guitar shot going into WrestleMania 3. Now, the initial surgery reportedly was so painful afterwards that they had to perform a second surgery on Jake, which is going to keep him out until the fall of 1989, which just so happens to coincide with when the trial decision is supposed to be rendered on the assault charges. So Jake decides, I'm going to be off anyway. I guess I'm going to go get this surgery done. And I've had various guests on here. We've kind of been batting back and forth because this is something I didn't follow. I wasn't aware of this assault charge stuff until I started digging into it. I know that other people were. I was not. But all of these newspapers and things, I mean, it's out there. There's so much information on it. Anybody can Google it and pop up something. But I put it all together and tried to make it make sense. But I go, wait a minute. So he never had the neck, like that was a gimmick that his neck, I knew the injury was real, but did he never have the surgery? And now as I continue to do the studying, I realized, no, he used this time to get the surgery as well. So I guess there's a little bit of truth into everything, but man, Jake Roberts, believe it or not, right now in 89, he's a mess.
Yeah. I mean, well, I jokingly probably call this Jake's downfall. If there is such a thing, even though it does get worse and worse, so you go into 1990, 91, where essentially they just had nothing to do. I don't think he could do anything more as a face, and then, his heel turn until he left. But Dusty's not a bad replacement when it comes to that. So, and it's Jake, rest in peace, Jerry Gray, who had unfortunately just passed away. But for all the uninitiated, if you have not listened to the 605 with Jerry Gray and Jake Roberts, it is well worth your time and attention. Let's just put it that way. But it's funny if you didn't watch the TV and you just watched the pay-per-views, which when I was younger, that was a lot of what I did. Where if you went from WrestleMania, where he's going against Andre, and then you go to SummerSlam, he's nowhere to be found. And if you're a Jake fan, like, what's going on? And then you get to Survivor Series, like, oh, he's with Hogan and Demolition. This is great. And just like, it's just this blurb because, and I think a lot of that is Dusty coming in, and then a few other things on the undercard, which, you know, you're getting to the point of, you know, Dusty's kind of going to fill that void, at least for a little bit. And then, you know, Jake obviously comes back later in the year.
What's so interesting about certain talent here is you can tell when Vince is a fan of someone because he constantly has them factored into storylines. And Jake was one of those guys that never really fell out of that. Like, there weren't very many periods where Jake didn't have some sort of a feud going on. You talk about this we go straight from Rude to Andre. I mean, literally finishing his feud with Rude as the Andre feud begins in the same match. Happens again at WrestleMania. Literally finishing his feud with Andre as his feud with DiBiase begins. But then Jake's off the road. They bring it back when Jake comes back with DiBiase and Jake through WrestleMania 6 and immediately randomly move into a feud with Bad News Brown. Then we go into the Brother Love show with Rick Martel with the spray. Then Earthquake kills Damien. I mean, it just continues. It's like nonstop. Jake Roberts, one feud after another, because he was such a great character. Maybe not the greatest performer wrestling in the ring, but certainly the character was amazing. And that's why he was always able to put on the show, right? The storylines, the angles, they require psychology and the ability to act. And he certainly knew that shtick very well. And so I'm looking forward to his return. I'm going to miss him for 6 months because he did an amazing job with, now their matches with Rick Rude, I could do without for whatever reason. Those did not gel well. And they stuck those guys together for like 8 freaking months, 9 months, something like that. Too long on the road. But every time they hit those angles on TV, masterpiece stuff. Those guys were amazing together.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny you mentioned that. I mean, you could WrestleMania 4, the last match of the first round, and there's a boring chance. And the matches themselves were just, but when you had a hot angle where you would get you'd get the story up to date when you'd watch the next pay-per-view, and you'd see Jake pulling down Rude's pants, and then they'd blur it out because, you know, obviously you're thinking he's naked underneath, probably just a big song. And you get excited, or the Cheryl Roberts stuff where he's trying to give her a rude awakening and she's just like, no, and then, which gets a little bit tense, and then you're getting some realism into it, but then you get to the match and you're just like, oh my God, I feel taken.
No, 100%. You know, I always say, and I guess the timing just wasn't right too, but I always say, what if they had done that angle with Elizabeth? You know, with him trying to, oh man, you want to talk about some heat, Savage and Rude, and they'd worked in Memphis. So unfortunately, it just really, the timing wasn't right for that to happen, but that would have been tremendous as well. But I don't want to get completely off topic. We could fantasy book all day and talk about these guys all day. But right now we're going to talk about another guy who made his return to the WWF as part of WrestleMania 5, as bizarre as that was. His first match back was also we just covered it on the last edition of the Grenade, May 27th edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, taking on Boris Zukov. And now, as of the month of June here in 89, the Superfly brother, Jimmy Snuka, returning on the road for the World Wrestling Federation. Now, little Ray Russell didn't know anything about Jimmy Snuka's background, okay? He was just a cool-looking dude that did an awesome splash off the top rope, so for me, at this point in time, I couldn't be more excited than to see the Superfly and that awesome theme music on my screen.
Yeah, the all-time great WWF theme. If you can find, I mean, I literally just downloaded it. There is actually an official version of it, at least on the iTunes store, at least that I got. I'm just like, I'll do that when I run. I do that when I walk. When I want to feel good about myself after a really shitty day, I will put that on and be like, Superfly. And it's just great. And it's Snuka in general. I mean, this is a far cry from your 1983 Jimmy Snuka, who is over like gangbusters. Like, I just recently watched him and Morocco in the cage in Madison Square Garden of October of '83, which is good God, that feud is amazing and brings back so many memories of just how great Morocco was as opposed to, I mean, how over Jimmy was. But this is definitely a different Jimmy Snuka because obviously, you know, had gone through the end of his run was just after WrestleMania. And it just kind of went away, and he meandered, you know, went to the AWA and a few other places, and then he, like you said, he comes back WrestleMania 5, and just kind of comes back, and he looks almost catatonic in a way. He's just looking at the camera, he's giving the I love you, and I'm just like, I'm hoping he wasn't on substances, but knowing Jimmy, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. But he's just, and I mean, as a kid, you couldn't go wrong. I mean, that splash off the top, at some points you could tell it did not feel worked. It was just like, he just hit this guy. And it's like, I can't imagine the person just sucking wind for probably about 5 to 6 minutes after it happened. But, you know, Jimmy was great around this. It was great around this time period for me as a kid. Now, the older me would be like, well, yeah, Jimmy's not quite Jimmy anymore.
Well, I don't know if Jimmy was ever all there. You know, you hear the stories, but I don't think a lot of people realize Jimmy was already getting up there in age as far as a performer goes. Even in his first run in the early 80s in the WWF, he was at the tail end of his peak then. I mean, he was not what he could have been, what he was in Mid-Atlantic or Portland, or just the little clips and things we can find of Jimmy Snuka prior to the WWF, but he was enough, more than enough, especially for New York in the early 80s, and that was a fantastic run he had there, kind of stopgap, I guess, till Hogan got there, basically, indirectly. And obviously they were able to phase him out in 85 when I don't know if they just didn't want to deal with it anymore, is my understanding, but they bring him back here. Vince clearly loved Superfly. And like you said, man, I always like to take the screen caps the grabs of the pictures of all the videos I watch. So, that's what I post online a lot. And there are just two looks that Snuka does. And that 1 minute that he's working Boris, there's these two looks, and I grabbed pictures of both of them. I was like, I don't think you can fake that, man. That dude doesn't look like he's there. And you referenced that music. Jim Johnston was so good. Sometimes he'd recycle shit, but he was so good. And they talked about how does Vader walk? And that's how they came up with the Vader. Jimmy Snuka's music, there's just certain noises, and it's like, I picture that's the noise he hears when he's staring off into space. So, like, I think it just perfectly captures the Superfly, but it's great to have him back on my screen, and I'm looking forward to his upcoming feud with the Honky Tonk Man. When we get there, I'm going to share a little story that I have as a kid watching that as it happened in my living room, and I'm looking forward to getting there when we get there on the TV, which won't be too far off, but so Jimmy Snuka is back in the company, and how can we forget RRG? No, that's not rugged, but rather referee Ronnie Garvin, now acting as an official on the road. So it's not just a TV taping thing. It's not just a TV angle. They're doing it on the house shows as well. Rugged Ronnie Garvin, an official here in the WWF for storyline purposes.
Yeah, Rugged Ronnie Garvin is so strange as a kid, but going back, and then when you see his stuff in Crockett, and he goes from that to this, and it's just weird because it comes in late 88, not much fanfare, but he comes over and kind of does this thing, and then, had that match with, the 400-pound, it seemed like a 400-pound block of concrete in Dino Bravo with arms and legs, and just was like, okay. And it's funny enough, and then he ends up, fighting with Greg Valentine later in one of, I know a lot of people do like the Rumble 90 match, but the fact that they're trying to do pinfalls, and it's just like, did they
too
forget?
Many times?
I'm like, did you forget? Or did you forget the steps? Or it's just like, I don't care. I can work with you, and we're just going to beat the shit out of each other, and we're going to have a good time. Because, funny enough, this is pretty much almost his entire run, or at least half of it, that he is partnered up with Greg Valentine, because I don't know who else you put with Ronnie Garvin at this point, because does Ronnie Garvin fit into the cartoon character world of some of the people in the WWF?
Well, and Ronnie's told this story, so it's Ronnie's version as well, but he said he came in to get the job with Vince, and he told him, look, I'm not doing any of this hokey cartoon bullshit. I'll go out there and job to whoever you want me to job to, whatever you want me to do in the ring as a wrestler, I'll go out there and do, but I'm not doing a fucking gimmick. And Vince hires him. Okay, all right, that's cool. Now, Garvin, of course, not the tallest guy in the world, but if you listen to anybody who knew Ronnie Garvin, they always said Haku was always going to be number one, toughest guy in the locker room. Ronnie Garvin would have been number two. So legitimately, he probably could have KO'd pretty much anybody he wanted in that locker room. But based on stature and size on TV, Vince is not going to give Ronnie any kind of a serious push. And like you said, he arrives with no fanfare, no vignettes, obviously no gimmick. Not that he needs one. I was fine with him being rugged Ronnie Garvin. That was his gimmick. He threw a towel to the fucking crowd. I was cool with that. But they never do anything with him. He's rarely on syndicated. If you're not on syndicated TV, it's like you don't exist. You might air on primetime, but they don't really acknowledge the things that air on primetime. That's when you can kind of get an idea of where they're pushing guys. The Blue Blazers on primetime, unfortunately, or Ron Bass is on primetime. Guys that they don't really want to use, they're putting on primetime. And that's what they do here with Ronnie Garvin a lot more often than not. And then he's in the company, I'll be generous, say 4 months. He's in the company 4 months and he's having a retirement match. What does that tell you? Like, they'd have nothing for you. And it goes 3 minutes, by the way. And now he's a referee. And okay, so that's fun. We're going to see what he's knocking out job guys that are picking fights with him and things. I'm cool with that. Even though they typically give him the matches with guys that aren't really like Red Rooster. He's a referee in almost every single Red Rooster match because it's like, it doesn't matter. It's Terry Taylor. So we'll get you over in this one, Ron. So we know this is going to continue on. We know they're going to eventually reinstate him. We know he's going to work Garvin, Valentine, like you said, at Rumble 90. And that's pretty much, Garvin's going to be there till like September. But they don't really do anything with him after that match with Greg Valentine at the Royal Rumble. So this is it for him. This is his entire gimmick for, like you said, damn near a year. He's going to work with the Hammer, but he's out here doing the storyline and he looks cool in that referee shirt. Ronnie Garvin, what else can you say? We'll keep an eye on him. Also, look out for newcomer to the company. He's not going to be here super long. I don't know if you even remember this guy. Mark Young, who wore like red, white, and blue tights. He came out to kind of breakdancing music, and he did like little breakdancing moves in the ring. And he's famous for being on the opening of, I think it was Superstars later on when he returns as a job guy under a different name, like Underbow, Todd Underbow or Overbow or something. But he takes a clothesline from Earthquake and does a complete backflip in midair off the clothesline. And so he's famous for that in the intro next year in 1990. But here he is Mark Young, just coming off of a very brief run as Vince Young in the NWA doing a similar gimmick. But the reason he even has a job at this point is he is the adopted son of one Chief Jay Strongbow. I don't know if you remember Mark Young at all.
Not at the time, but later on, seeing him in early '89 in WCW was so funny because watching the 605 show and him doing his little breakdancing in some of the matches, and it's interesting for that time period because it's like you didn't see anything really like that, no. At least there. If it had been a WWF, maybe. If it had been a WWF, maybe it would have been, maybe that's the gobbledygooker before we get the gobbledygooker, but for the most part, it's. I'd say from like 89 to like 1991 or 92, there are some interesting jobbers when it comes to, and then some of the, let's just say, new gimmicks that they want to foist on you for maybe a week or two, and then they're nowhere to be seen ever again.
Yeah, I was very upset when Battle Cat came and left so quick. That was a Battle Cat mark, man. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I was huge on the Battle Cat gimmick and Brady Boone, and they give it to Bob Bradley, and then next thing you know, it's just not there anymore. But Mark Young, I don't know, man. I enjoyed the fact that he could take a hell of a bump, but I don't think he was ever going to get over as a push talent here.
Yeah, very much so. But to me, it's like, I think as kids, we love the gimmick so much. And it comes to that's just something that burns into your memory as opposed to the work be damned, because the good matches will show up as good matches regardless of age because of just how talented the two are at tangoing and making the match memorable and presentable to you in a good way. But when it comes to a gimmick, it's just like it just comes out to you and just, okay, this is great. And then when you're older, it may or may not be good.
Well, I'm going to stick by Battle Cat for the WWE Hall of Fame. We'll see how that works. So let's get that trending, guys. Here's a guy, I think he's part of the Hall of Fame in some way, shape, or form anyway, talking about Barry Windham. As of June 1989, Barry has agreed to come into the company. He had finished up with Turner Brand around February, March-ish time frame, I do believe. Barry had basically, from my memory of covering the 1989 on the NWA years ago here on the Grenade, Barry didn't really trust the powers that be at the time. He was a big Dusty guy, and Dusty had left. Dusty was no longer under the book. Dusty was not in the company, and Barry did not feel comfortable continuing to remain on in the company. I guess he had some issues as well with some of the people, and he leaves. And he's going to head over to Dusty's PWF, which clearly flounders as Dusty's now here in the WWF. So enter Barry Windham under the moniker of the Widowmaker. And as a kid, I was like, what is a widow? Sometimes these gimmicks, like I remember Steve Austin saying, "What's stunning? What makes me stunning? I don't really understand." Well, I thought Steve was stunning, but I didn't understand why Barry Windham was a Widowmaker. And as time progressed, I go, widow, I know what that is. He makes widows. Oh, he kills men, I guess. And I get it's a wrestler, so okay. But then come to find out, as an adult, when I actually watched Widowmaker promos, he was literally the bull of the woods, if you will, because the Widowmaker was the dirtiest, nastiest, meanest bull. And that was basically, that was Barry's gimmick, the meanest bull in Texas. Barry Windham here in the WWF. Unfortunately, he barely ever works in between injuries, and he comes in with an injury. He has a wrist and hand injury leaving Turner and coming to the WWF. And then, of course, there's that whole counterfeit scheme later on that Barry has to deal with his family.
Yeah, I still think this is punishment for him leaving after losing the tag straps in '85, because he's just like, funny enough, I mean, if you go back and watch the time where they're the U.S. Express and then they had won the tag belts back that summer, and then you watch the Spectrum show where they job to the Dream Team, and then and funny enough, the second Saturday Night's Main Event, he's there, and then they black his eye because he had got that cigarette, the stogie burn to his face, and it just was nothing. You really didn't see much of them after that. He had given his notice, and then we get Timu, Barry Windham, and Dan Spivey when it comes to '86 and even into '87. I mean, people don't. I mean, people, if you haven't watched the house shows from back then, how long that the U.S. Express technically did stay together, because Rotunda stayed there, another 2 years. But Barry Windham at this point, it's just like, if you didn't watch the TV and you went pay-per-view to pay-per-view, even Saturday Night's Main Event, he didn't even make a Saturday Night Main Event. I mean, that's how forgettable this run of Barry Windham is, because it's like, when Zeus gets top billing in one of them, even though I know you had just done Saturday Night's Main Event with Zeus, was like the focal point before the cage match, and then you're just like, whoa, this is different. And then and then obviously the next one he is even more prominently, because we're getting ready for SummerSlam, and that's the last main event beforehand. But yeah, Barry Windham at this point, oh my God, it's just terrible. I was also this wasn't around the time where he was dating Lonnie Anderson, was it? Or was that later on?
I have no idea. I have no idea off the top of my head. I do know that, peak Barry Windham in the ring, probably we already lost, even though he has amazing stuff when he comes back to WCW later on, especially in that Watts era. Because, again, as my son last year binged WCW 90, 91, I noticed Barry was out most of 90. I'm like, what is that? He just came back and he was gone for the majority of the year. He only comes back really to replace Flair at the Starrcade, because Flair has to be a fucking Black Scorpion, because we never booked a fucking Black Scorpion. And so Barry comes for that, and then he's kind of back off again for months. And it's like, what is injuries are piling up on Barry, and that really hurts him. He's not going to be the Barry Windham of the 1980s ever again, but he has some really good stuff as a babyface later on in 91, 92 in WCW. But for all intents and purposes, Barry's greatest stuff was shortly before this run in the WWF, but now the injuries are starting. But that's really irrelevant here in WWF land. Barry had the look. Barry never looked more like a WWF star than in 1989. Right before he left WCW, I said, he looks like a WWF guy. He had the size, he had the build, he got the tan, he grew the heel beard, the hair was slicked back, the brown vet. I mean, he looked like he could kick some ass in New York. And then he comes here basically in the same look. And they just do nothing with him. And again, relegated to prime time. I don't know how many times the Widowmaker even appears on syndicated TV. It's so odd. And it's so weird that you would punish a guy that you could potentially make money off of. And here's the weirdest part, and I noticed this as a kid all the time when I would rent the tapes. Barry Windham, supposed to be part of the King's Court with Randy Savage at Survivor Series, gets replaced by Earthquake last minute. Royal Rumble 1990, Barry Windham listed on the 30 guys, gets replaced by the Red Rooster, who couldn't even make the fucking field by that point, Terry Taylor. My goodness. But I mean, so, and I don't think that he was pulled because Vince, I don't think he would have been in that position to begin with. It was just shit was happening. And Barry, it was just a bad time in Barry's life. And, his family didn't help matters either with what was going on with Kendall and Blackjack and whatnot. So, and I understand that Barry had to, help them out. I don't know about financially, but just kind of be there, during a lot of that kind of nonsense that was going on with them at that point in time. So he had to keep leaving. There were nagging injuries, and it's just what could have been. Because looking at Barry Windham in 1989, that just looked like somebody Vince could make money with.
Yeah, Hogan run. I mean, to me, no offense to Mr. Perfect at late 89 into 90, but I mean, to me, you could have slipped Barry Windham into that too. Not that that's no knock on Mr. Perfect, because Kurt is obviously one of the better workers out there, at least at that time period, and was continuing to make his ascension up the card, and to be your Intercontinental Champion for pretty much a year, and then injuries kind of derailed that later on in his career. But Barry's one of those guys, at least at that time, it could have been like with people wanting Bruce or Brody for WrestleMania 2 instead of Bundy. Could have been, I think, something along those lines. Could have been good for Barry if he was motivated.
And see, this is where I can differentiate my favorites, even though Barry was one of my favorites too, but my favorites versus what would have been better for business, because I'm a Mr. Perfect guy all day. And Barry, they're both in my top favorite 5 to just watch. So, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to, but believability wise, Barry was just the bigger guy. He had that mean look. Kurt Hennig, I don't know if he had really reached that level. I don't know if he ever reaches that level to counteract Hulk Hogan, to be quite frank with you. But Barry Windham in that position, I don't know that personality-wise it would have worked as well. But I think anybody's going to work with Hogan as long as you have that credible opponent. And so, unfortunately, we wouldn't have got Hogan in the Genius. So I don't want to sub that out because I couldn't live if that match hadn't have happened. I'm sure that's what kept me watching wrestling for another 20, 30 years. Was that match? It's just such a great match in the history of wrestling. I love it. I love going back and watching that every once in a while. I'm looking forward to getting there.
Yeah, the back rake on Saturday Night's Main Event where Jesse's just going, Eddie's raking his back. That Hogan, that chump Hogan, and going through that. Nothing better.
Always the cheater. Well, we talk about baby faces and we talk about cheaters, and there's a guy who's going to do what he's going to do because he is the hot rod. Talking about Roddy Piper. He made his return at WrestleMania 5 for a special Piper's Pit segment with Brother Love, Morton Downey Jr., me and Joe Morata of OBVP. We spent an hour talking about a 20-minute segment. That's just how much we had to say about it. Most of it not good, but a lot of it hilarious. I encourage everybody to go back in the archives of the Grenade. Check that out, part 2 of the WrestleMania 5 review. But Piper actually not only worked WrestleMania 5 as a show host, but he also filled in, before Dusty got here, Piper filled in a few dates against DiBiase for Jake Roberts there in the month of May. But as of June, Hot Rod had not signed a full-time contract with the WWF. But rumors are now abound that a deal is being finalized here in June, and Roddy Piper scheduled to return to TV, but not as a wrestler, not yet anyway. Roddy Piper returning to the WWF airwaves at some point in the month of July.
Yeah. Sadly, this is great value Piper at this point. I mean, I love Roddy Piper in 84 through 87. You couldn't get any better. I mean, even though I'd say you could probably go even in part of 86, he kind of does slow down a little bit, but 84, 85 Roddy Piper is a sight to behold. And I know other people will even go back to his Mid-Atlantic and Georgia stuff, which is absolutely fantastic too. I mean, Piper for a good 5 to 6, I'd say 5 to 6 years was as good as it gets as far as a heel or a babyface in this business. But when he came back, it's just like, you wouldn't call it Hollywood Roddy Piper, or maybe it's sanitized Roddy Piper, even though he would still probably do the out of nowhere, like, innuendo line. And as a kid, it just goes, oh, this is hilarious because it's Roddy Piper when you go, holy shit. If I heard this now and my kid was here, like, what? I'm like, okay. But, Piper at this point, and then, obviously later on when he gets into commentary, which, I don't know of too many people that are really clamoring for Hot Rod behind the mic, because obviously he takes over for Jesse in about a year from now when Jesse leaves the company, which is unfortunate. I mean, I think most of us here are Gorilla and Jesse fans, or Jesse and McMahon fans. One of my favorite Saturday Night Main Event lines, it's where he talks about McMahon's neck being a redneck. Essentially, he goes, well, how do, McMahon? And then he goes, yes, Jesse, as I'm from the South. Well, I know you got the IQ for it down real low. Well, now I need to go check. Yep, red. So, I mean, it's, Piper at this point in time, it's just, I mean, the thing that is the saving grace is I think he did with Rude having that feud with the Warrior. I think he had a nice little aside with Piper later on in the year, because I think that was something to do. I mean, the prime times I know are fantastic, where Rude and him go back and forth, where I think that's where Piper excels. In the ring, probably not as much, but at this point, I mean, if you had watched Rowdy earlier in his career, you'd probably be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, most certainly. It's like a caricature, you're drawing of
paint
once
by
upon
numbers.
a time. Yeah, Hot Rod. It's really unfortunate. He never really finds his way back completely to that other character, which is sad to say, but I was a big Roddy Piper kid, but I'm with you. Like, Gorilla and Bobby were my team, especially on primetime. They were my comfort food every week, Monday or Tuesday, whichever time they were going at. I don't really know what they were thinking. I guess maybe name value wise, let's get Roddy in there, let's see what we can do. But you got two baby faces now, or Piper was kind of a tweener. He's kind of told it like it was. He picked and chooses who he wanted to root for there on primetime. And I get that they wanted to give Bobby Heenan his own show, which didn't last very long. USA was not happy with that, but I was never so happy than when Bobby Heenan returns to the set. And we'll be covering all of that long form as we continue on. But the Hot Rod will be back here before too long. And he's going to be back as, I guess you would call him, a broadcaster, because he does not step back into the ring until after SummerSlam, when he begins his feud with Rick Rude. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But tryouts here in the month of June include a couple of names that some of you may find familiar. A guy by the name of Kevin Kelly, who will later go on to become Nails here in the WWF, and also a guy by the name of Big Steel Man. Put a lot of thought into that one. He has Slick as his manager here, at least for the tryouts. Big Steel Man will get a job at this point as Tugboat. We're going to see Big Steel Man return here as Tugboat. They were impressed at this large behemoth, pal. Kevin Kelly's going to have to wait a few years.
Yeah, no, and cornering Vince McMahon and saying he... and in a court before he ended up a court deposition where he attacked McMahon and said, "Oh yeah, you tried to molest me." I'm like, well, that's maybe a little bit different, but the Nails run in 1992. My God, but Uncle Fred can't go wrong with Uncle Fred, as my brother lovingly called Tugboat Slug Boat. Because we were not a fan of Tugboat.
I was, nor was I. It was one of the ones I never latched onto.
It was Hogan's Hop Along, and it's just kind of. I mean, it's funny that Bruce Pritchard says that they were going to have Tugboat turn heel in main event WrestleMania 7, which I'm like, I don't know how you're going to get that.
That was going to sell out the Coliseum right there, 100,000 fans strong for Chic Tugboat. Battling Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship. Yeah, sign me up all day long.
Goddamn, pal. Let's just have on a boat.
Wasn't it SummerSlam? They yanked Tugboat right out of that damn story just because of, I don't even know what the reasoning was, to be quite frank with you. I don't understand what that was about.
I know Earthquake put him out, but then, funny enough, with his heel turn, and I think they kind of interwove it back, but if you didn't pay attention, you'd be like, why the hell is Tugboat turning heel? And I just think the Boss Man was more popular because obviously he had turned at WrestleMania just before WrestleMania, and he was a much bigger deal than Tugboat. And Tugboat was just he's glomming off the great injury angle between Earthquake and Hogan.
He sure was. See,
Yes.
you figured it out.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here. Lots of new stuff happening here at WrestleCopia, and I want to update you on everything going on with the brand right now. First and simple, if you haven't checked out our website at WrestleCopia.com, it's a great way to keep up with the latest episodes of all of your favorite Copia programming, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade to Regional Wrestling with the Territory Talk, the Wrestling Stoop with the legendary Bob Roop, Professor Dan Ginnity and the Pro Wrestling Academy, and all the other great podcasts from Gene Jackson, Bob Smith, Dave Dynasty, and the boys from the Other Ship. And of course, all of those programs also available at your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the Copia world, all the latest news, random thoughts, fun videos, pictures, and more, make sure to join the more than 33,000 followers over at Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. Don't be left out. Please also follow us at the former Twitter, now X, at Wrestling Grenade, and subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. Would also greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review at your favorite podcast apps, guys, because every positive review makes our podcasts more visible in the algorithms, if you will, which allows us to continue to grow. Now, for those who have been asking about merchandise, WrestleCopia merch, you can find plenty of designs for our t-shirts, hats, magnets, stickers, coffee mugs, and more over at the TeePublic store. That is tpublic.com/user/WrestleCopia. And last but definitely not least, it's what keeps the entire machine going. I'm talking about patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Now with 3 major tiers and tons of Patreon exclusive next level content for our supporters. Remember guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Well, we talked of newcomers, returns. Now let's talk about a couple of guys leaving the company. Big John Studd going to quit the promotion on June the 6th at the TV tapings. Now, some cite a lousy $8,500 payoff for John Studd working as the referee at WrestleMania 5. Now, think about that for a minute, because you're talking about $35,000 in today's money that Studd got to do absolutely nothing. And he's complaining about the payout. Now, Bruce Pritchard claims otherwise. He says it's Andre had been bullying him in the ring, pummeling him, stepping on his hair, pulling his hair, laying it in, and Studd had just had enough and he quit. I've heard various stories. I'm sure there's little bit of truth to all of it, to be honest with you. But I think John came back and just said, yeah, no, this is just not for me. Nor do I think his body really held up, based on the little bit we got to see of him. The guy really couldn't take a bump. He couldn't do anything. In fact, he wasn't even a month beyond Royal Rumble. So Vince gives him the Rumble win, and it's reported at a house show, and I can't remember where now, but about a month after the Rumble, the agents, Vince, I'm not sure who it was there at the house show, but they came to Studd and told him, you are to slam Akeem tonight. And if you can't make that slam look believable, we don't need you here. You're terminated as of tonight. Now, we know Akeem's one of the greatest, big men in the business. So I'm sure he got up for Studd, no problems, whatever. Obviously, John kept his job. But it seemed like they were still focused on having this Andre Studd immobile force meeting the immobile object feud that was going to happen after WrestleMania, which, I'm happy it's over. But, man, this is such a weird – this is of the 1980s, maybe even the 1990s, one of the weirdest returns and disappearances of a star, really, in wrestling. His guys didn't really come to the company and then just walk away, but here's John Studd doing that after just 5 months.
Yeah, no. John Studd is just, it's painful. It's so bad. Looking at it back even now, it's just brutal. To me, it's, you go from Jesse in WrestleMania 5, we got Andre the Giant and Big John Studd. We're getting double our money's worth, Gorilla. But the thing of it is, it's just like, okay, but, if in 84 and 85, even, go back to 83 if you want to, because that's literally that Andre Studd feud. If you go back in time, it goes from about 83 all the way to about 85, past like WrestleMania. Yeah. And then even goes into Saturday Night's Main Event, and then the Machines at 86, because you have Studd and Bundy. And it's just like, and Studd was okay then, and I don't know what Vince saw in him, what wanted him to come back, because it's like,
big pal.
I guess, but at the same time, it's like you get Heenan involved, because it's like, if you're smart, like, this guy can get anybody over. He can get your mother over. It just kind of happens, and that's his way of coming back in. But then they gave him the Rumble, and the 89 Rumble to me is the most out there Royal Rumble of all time. And there have been some whoppers over the years, but even 88 had a little bit more, because granted, it was an inaugural event and people are just getting used to this, but it being the first pay-per-view, and John Studd wins, and 6 months later he's gone. It's just really, really strange, and it just did not work for a litany of reasons. I just think Studd wasn't as good as he was, if any, from 4 to 5 years earlier, and I just think the business had passed him by. And
isn't that so weird, though? You're not the first person to mention that the business passed John, his character, his gimmick, his style, whatever you want to call it, by. And you look at all these other guys that have been working just as long as John, or had been out of the business longer than John. Look at Jimmy Snuka. He's been gone for years, and he falls right into that, and he looks like he belongs here. Not only from, the look to the gimmick. He can still fly. Jimmy fits right in. And he leaves, before John leaves, really. And John just comes back very lumbering, very slow. A lot of it has to do with the fact that he can't move, but as you watch him in the ring, it's almost like he forgot how to be a wrestler. I don't mean wrestling. I mean to play to the crowd, to have facial expression, to sound like he wants to be there when he's cutting a promo. It was just like, there was this guy that you were like, you're going to go play pro wrestler, and he's just doing it kind of, I don't know, like half-assed is the way this entire run felt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's just, quite frankly, it's probably a good thing he left, but getting $8,500 at a WrestleMania for being a referee, that's almost like grand larceny at this point.
And that's 89 money, right? That's way more money now. My goodness. I guess he thought his name value.
Wrong business, Ray. We're in the wrong business.
Absolutely. I need to be a referee. Oh, man. Well, John Studd, and I don't think it's very often people are going to make this line, but thank God for Hillbilly Jim, who's going to be replacing Big John Studd in the feud with Andre the Giant. I think Andre was even happy about this, but they're going to do an angle, at least in the markets where this angle does exist. Unlike Jake and the DDT on Hogan in the Snake Pit, this footage does exist pretty handily. It's probably on YouTube. If it's not, I'll post it when I get to it. But they're going to do an angle where Andre kind of confronts Hillbilly for no reason, and he wants to sidestep him or something, and Hillbilly clubs him with the horseshoe and knocks Andre down, and here we go. And it only airs in certain markets because it's like, we're not going to have Hillbilly knock Andre out everywhere, just where we're actually going to have the match. But this is a match that's coming perhaps to an arena near you if you live in a C-Town show event. So Hillbilly Jim and Andre the Giant get a feud here for a little bit.
Yeah. Hillbilly just kind of hung around. It's just funny with Hillbilly. He has this big debut, gets Hogan behind him, and he's over. I mean, you can't deny.
Yeah, over. No, he was super over.
Breaks his leg. Yeah, and then he just kind of hangs around, and then I think just by happenstance, he just comes into these feuds, gets paid. It's not particularly good, but at the same time, I think he was just so well liked by everybody. I think whoever he was working with, it probably just either felt like a night off, like we're just going to make some money and slap each other in the face, and
well,
Bob's.
I think he made a great mascot as well for the company. You talked about the Gobbledygooker, which was supposed to be a mascot later, but I think Hillbilly, he was tied in with the Coliseum videos, so whenever they would do releases and things, he was involved in that. He would go around to, Speedy Muffler or Bob's Donuts or whatever and sign autographs and things. So Hillbilly was not on the road very much. Going back to the beginning of when I started tackling the Grenade at the beginning of '87, Hillbilly really hasn't been on the road unless they're doing an additional tour overseas and they need more bodies, or they're doing D shows for the summer or whatever the case may be. Then they'll call on Hillbilly. You'll see him back for a little bit, and then he's gone again. And he does about one match per year on TV at this point anyway. And now, once again, they need a big guy, and Hillbilly's a big guy, to replace John Studd for the short term. And Hillbilly's the next man up, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. But who'd have thunk you would have get a Hillbilly Jim, Andre the Giant, we'll call it a feud here in 1989. I don't know. It wasn't on my bingo card as a kid, but John Studd no more, and neither will be by the time we get to the end of June. Owen Hart, the Blue Blazer, who in recent weeks, if you guys have been paying attention to the Grenade here, relegated to makeshift tag teams on Primetime Wrestling with the likes of Coco Beware, his future high-energy partner, and here it is, Hillbilly Jim and the Blue Blazer. What a sight to see. But it's the Blazer doing the jobs in these matches to the finishers. Spike Pile Driver by the Brainbusters, Ghetto Blaster by Bad News Brown. So the writing on the wall for Owen, working prime time, doing jobs, being fill-ins, random tag teams and things like that. I think there's more to come. He's going to do a job here pretty soon to the Warlord in like 2 minutes on prime time. But Owen reportedly going to get married and off to a honeymoon, and he gave his notice. He's like, this isn't for me. I'm going to go back to Calgary, and I'm going to go back to Japan.
Yeah, really sad. I just don't think they figured out what to do with Owen until later on. And I mean, you got to give credit to Bret to help get him in the door. And, at 93 and 94, you can't ask for a better kind of storyline feud. I know there are people that do swear against it, but I absolutely love the brother versus brother feud between him and Bret in late 93 and then through 94, which I wish it would have went longer, to be honest. But, Owen Hart, just an absolute fantastic in-ring worker. And I mean, to me, it just didn't fit in the 1989 WWF. I mean, I think that's pretty evident when it comes to that. I mean, the match between him and Perfect, that's a nice little match nestled into, their biggest pay-per-view, because obviously if you look at a few of the matches in WrestleMania 5,
sure,
they're not Perfect and Owen Hart. I mean, like the false finish where he complains about the count, and it was a great little match, but to me, it's just like Jesse would put him over immensely. You never know what he's going to do up there, Gorilla. And just the danger aspect of what he was doing.
I think Jesse's best line was, if I wasn't sitting here with you, I'd think that was me. So it's Of course, but Bobby would put, Blazer over as well. Bobby would also, I don't wonder who the guy is under the mask, but Bobby would put him on. Everybody seemed to put the Blazer over. And you always hear tell that Vince always wanted a Mighty Mouse character, pal. And I think that was kind of it. That was his Tiger Mask. That was his Mighty Mouse character at that time. But Vince's problem is, I love Mighty Mouse. I grew up watching Mighty Mouse, the cartoon. But Vince can't get over this. Only big guys can win matches. Only big guys can. So even though he loves this gimmick, he doesn't want to push this gimmick because he can't beat anybody bigger than him. And so this is where he winds up. And I think it was a detrimental to Owen in the fact that he got hurt at Survivor Series, his groin and whatever the story was there with Greg Valentine on the leapfrog. And he's out for about 2 months. And you see what happens to guys. Don't get injured on my watch, pal. Vince really, he gives it back to him. They pay for it. I've seen it happen time and time again here, just covering, the grenade stuff. And Owen was not the same guy either. He either needed more time off or I don't know what the case is, but he hasn't moved this entire year of 89, has not moved like he did before the injury at Survivor Series. He still has flashes of good stuff like with DiBiase at Saturday night's main event, but it's just not the total package. He's not keeping it going. It's just ebbs and flows of what we're going to get out of the Blazer right now. And I'm not knocking him. He's perfectly fine for the company. I don't know what went wrong here because I feel like they could have done more. It certainly would have been a great character for kids. I mean, I know I loved the Blue Blazer as a kid, but we'll see Owen back here. And fortunately, we'll also see the Blue Blazer back here before it's all over and with. But that's another story for another day. Well, we talked about guys coming in, guys leaving. There's a couple guys going to get injured here in June, including Bushwhacker Luke. What's that about? You actually do something to get injured, Luke. But Luke, going to go off the road briefly here in June. Curious to see what they do with Butch in that time frame. We'll have to wait and see. Also, this is a good one because I've heard Honky talk about this. Honky Tonk Man going to go off the road briefly here. And if you haven't been following the Grenade guys, and if you haven't been following Honky Tonk Man's career, it's been downhill since he refused to do that job, reportedly, allegedly, to Randy Savage over a year ago for that Intercontinental title. Now, Honky going to hold that belt till SummerSlam, do the job to the Warrior, and then he's forced to work the Warrior for months on end there. But when that feud finishes up, there's been absolutely nothing for Honky Tonk Man. They put him in a team with Greg Valentine for a couple months, and then they slot him in a feud with Hillbilly Jim. But now that Hillbilly's with Andre, they're giving Honky Tonk the Superfly, which is a step up, I think, in character alone. But Honky has complained. He loved Jimmy. I love Jimmy. I got no problem with Jimmy, but he said he would blame Jimmy's Superfly smash. I said, can you just take it easy on me, Jimmy? Can we do a different finish tonight? And so we're going to see Honky Tonk Man get quote-unquote injured here from the Superfly at a TV taping and take some time off. But really, at the end of the day, a couple things stick out to me. A, it's Honky Tonk Man. Maybe he just, wanted to take a little time off. But also, B, my understanding is Jimmy only did the splash on televised program. Like he did, because his body was so shot, he only did the splash when it was going to be aired. And he would do a crossbody otherwise. And so Honky blamed Jimmy for, I don't remember if it's a rib injury or whatever the case may be, but he blames Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, I mean, how the mighty have fallen with the Honky Tonk Man. I mean, after he lost the IC title, I mean, he was nothing. I mean,
he has no heat.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at both of if you mirror his runs in the early WWF and then in, ill-fated WCW, whether you want to watch that or not, he would just win. And when coming into WCW, I'm not doing jobs. I need to be built up like he did in his biggest run with Vince. And I think after that happened, I mean, he gets put into the tag team with Greg Valentine that eventually becomes Rhythm and Blues. And he's so forgettable. And it's just a total 180 that he was a year and a half earlier, which he was so hated. I mean, winning the Intercontinental title was the best thing. And then, telling Vince, go fly a kite. I'm not dropping the title to Savage. And, the biggest wrestling television program rating that they had done up to that point. And he just was gone. And and then funny enough, he even gets a bigger surprise with, our good friend Dusty Rhodes at SummerSlam, which I'm sure he was super happy to put over.
Yeah, absolutely. So Honky Tonk Man is going to linger around here all the way into January of 1991, but that's kind of what he does from this point forward, linger around, because, yeah, man, it's not good to tell the boss no. This isn't, I don't know, man. It's kind of crazy to think he was in a position where he could do it. He did it. And some people say that's just folklore and it never even actually happened. I wasn't there. I can't say for certain, but something happened. Because when he did do business with the Warrior, and he did great business, great bumps, great selling, took the 3 count, the whole 9 yards, fantastic stuff. But man, he pissed somebody off, because you don't go from having that kind of heat to just not being utilized to the point where the crowd doesn't care that you're on the TV screen that quickly. I mean, it's kind of insane when you go back and look at just how the crowd doesn't even, like 3 months ago, this guy was getting booed out of the building. Now the crowd doesn't even care that he's on the card. And so there was even a few months there where he didn't even bring the guitar with him, and he just didn't give a shit, So it's I don't know. It's Honky Tonk Man, and I love the gimmick, but I don't know. We'll follow Honky here with Jimmy Snuka here into the summer of '89. The latest experiment at a women's division will officially come to an end here in the month of June, with the sensational Sherry, now an active manager. The final 2 ladies involved, Judy Martin and the women's champion Rockin' Robin, will be permanently taken off the road in the latter half of the month, and the women's division will be dismantled. We won't see an attempt at another female division until the Alundra Blaze era of the mid-1990s. So this is pretty much it. I thought they were onto something briefly there with the Glamour Girls and the Jumping Bomb Angels. And I like the fact that we're going to bring a few more women in here, and Sherry was fantastic in her spot, but it just felt like they gave up on this a long time ago, because there was really never a division.
Yeah, no, well, it's funny because when Sherry comes in, summer 87, she wins the title. And then you watch Survivor Series and you're like, there's Moolah in the big shows between WrestleMania and WrestleMania 2. Moolah is either managing the world champion or she's world champion. And it just was such an afterthought. And to me, bringing in, and Rockin' Robin winning it is just like kind of out of left field, because she wasn't Wendy Richter. She wasn't anything special. And then she wins the title in Paris, and it doesn't even win in the U.S., wins it in Europe. What does that tell you, right? We're just going to give the European fans the title switch. And it just kind of went. And then they gave it a match on the Royal Rumble, and, Sherry did her deal. And then the funny thing is, when Sherry was champion even, she was Peggy Sue. And she wasn't even doing title defenses. So
because she didn't have anybody to work, so they literally had to find something for her to do to justify her being on the payroll.
And on top of it, you're not billing her as the woman's world champion. You're just she's just there. But, I mean, I think that speaks more to Sherry wanting to do something and putting her foot forward and be like, hey, I want to do something. I don't want to just sit here with a belt and not do anything. But Robin was not the answer either. And I mean, it was probably a good thing that they put an end to this. And it takes another, 4 years to get a women's world champion when they have the tournament in the end of 93.
Well, at one point they were doing 4 shows a night, A, B, C, and D. The D shows were probably drawing a couple hundred people, at these charity events and things like that. A lot of the times it was the women and the midgets rounding out the card, and the conquistadors and things like that. And so that's kind of where they were there. And then they bumped them up to the C show, and sometimes they're working the other shows, but not really. And it's just kind of weird. And there's never more than 2 women in the company at a time after the tag teams go away. There's just nothing there. And like you said, Rockin' Robin, she literally broke into the business and got a job. I don't know that Survivor Series wasn't her debut, without going back and looking into it. I know she tells the story that she was trying out training to get the job. And it was her competing with Baby Doll for that spot. And because Baby Doll had been a manager, they didn't want that to be perceived as their women's champion and manager. So they went with the green Rockin' Robin because they could mold her into whatever they wanted. And of course, it doesn't hurt that she has a bunch of family members here in the company. Grizzly Smith was here after UWF. Sam Houston was here. Not that he had any pull, but Jake Roberts was here as well. And so Robin gets some time in the company, and I'm sure she's grateful for it. But I often joke that it was WrestleMania 5 that sealed her fate, and the Brotherhood song that she sings. She has fun with that. She responded to my posts about her beautiful rendition of America the Beautiful there. So she's a good girl, man.
Yeah, no, well, I think it's when you have something like that happen, at least you're being honest about it and you're not kind of trying to BS your way through it. When there's little realism behind it, or at least they understand, like, yeah, it wasn't really as great as we thought it was.
Well, we got one more bit of news, then we'll look at a few house show matches real quick before we close up the program here. And I always like to throw in one of these on pretty much every one of these news episodes, because for everything Meltzer gets right, there are sometimes things that I don't know if he's just guessing, reading into things, whatever the story. This one's very interesting. I'd never heard this one before. According to the Melts, the San Francisco Examiner on Thursday, that would have been the first week of June, had a major story about the WWF's attempts to market, listen to this one, guys, Elizabeth perfume, which will be out in the fall of 1989. The story said that Titan will spend $5 million in advertising to get the perfume off the ground, which Meltzer says, of course, in the Meltzer way, $5 million actually means about 1.5 to 2 million in WWF money, like real money, versus what Vince is claiming. So, but to the best of my knowledge, Elizabeth perfume never happens.
Yeah, I had never heard this in my life, but oh boy. And it's his local paper too, because obviously he's in Campbell, which is a little bit north of where I'm at right now.
Okay.
And I'm like, I think at this point, I think people were just ribbing Dave, and he would just go with it. And I think in some cases, and this isn't an indictment on Dave in general, but I think there are people that are sources of his, or at least know a pipeline to get to him. Sometimes they'll pull a rib, but they'll get enough facts to where he will run with it. But that's a whopper. And I mean, to be fair to all us wrestling fans out there, and at that time in 1989, how many women were going to go and get Elizabeth perfume unless some of us more senior wrestling fans just wanted it for the simple fact if I have Elizabeth's perfume.
Yeah, this is what Elizabeth smells like. Spray my pillow with Elizabeth perfume. Yeah, that's kind of creepy. I'm not really sure who they would have marketed that to. Not sure
as long as it wasn't Vince. Goddamn, pal, that's a great fragrance.
Yeah, what does that smell like? You know what I think that smells like, pal? We don't want to know what you think that smells like, Vince. All right, we're going to jump into it really quickly here. Just some of the matches they're doing on the house shows in the month of June. We talked about it already. Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan on top of the A shows. Makes sense. On the smaller cities for the A shows, Hogan can't be bothered to come, brother, so they're going to fill in with Brutus Beefcake there. Beefcake currently in a feud with the Macho Man as well, after Savage and Sherry attacking the barber on the Brother Love show, cutting his hair. That's all going to lead, as we talked about at the top of the program, to SummerSlam. So we'll save that for later. But so Savage working Beefcake in the smaller markets, but also Hogan in most of the A towns. That's, of course, your top draw there. No shocker. Dusty Rhodes filling in. We've talked about this as well for Jake Roberts, working with Ted DiBiase. Now, this is fun, because I'm going to take you here to the Boston Garden, June the 3rd, 1989. And they brought Dusty in, and Vince immediately going to see if Dusty will do business. Because if you look at most of these results going back to the end of May, all the way through June, Big Dust doing the pinfall job to Ted DiBiase. So we're already testing him. Is this guy going to bitch? Is he going to complain? Where's the ego? Clearly, Dusty knew his role. He's like, just pay me, baby. Pay me, if you will. Go to the pay window. And Dusty Rhodes doing the job, but not here in Boston, which is interesting because this is televised. So the Boston fans are actually seeing Dusty pin the $1 Million Man, as we know it, as his debut here, or his return, if you will, to the WWF. So giving Dusty a win on TV tells me that there are plans for Dusty moving. Now, I know that sounds silly, but Vince could have been a dick. He could have just brought him in and jobbed him out in the mid-card, whatever he wanted to do with him, and then use him up. But I thought it was interesting. The one match that was taped, Dusty goes over.
Yeah, also this is the death of the era of the televised house shows, which still does continue on MSG Network. But, end of the Boston Garden, and a couple months earlier was Spectrum. Had been on Prism since the late 70s.
Right.
We talked to all the old wrestling fans of, as I became a bigger fan later on in the late 90s and early 2000s in tape trading, watching these shows, and, some forgettable, some unforgettable. It was a great way into seeing how it was so much different than regular television, syndicated television. You get these feuds, and it's sad. And then we get, the C announcers. We're getting Lord Alfred Hayes and Tony Schiavone, who Tony Schiavone at this point is, oh boy. I mean, he did good with Jesse, but at the same time, I just don't think Tony Schiavone was cut out, because, I mean, you get on syndication when Gorilla is making fun of you. And I don't know if it was a work or not, but I'm pretty sure it was. But I
think so. Tony speaks very affectionately of Gorilla, so I'm thinking that was a work. But I still, I don't know. Tony might have thought it was a work, though. Maybe Gorilla didn't. I don't.
Yeah, at that point you never know, because it was because Jesse goes into him at SummerSlam, being like, "You're the one who got Bobby Heenan kicked off of Superstars or Challenge," and goes completely nuts. And I mean, Jesse pretty much, I think, pulls him through in SummerSlam. But it's end of an era here, man. It's different.
I thought Jesse and Tony really meshed well. Obviously, Tony and Gorilla was not good. I didn't care for Tony and actually, me and my son just had this conversation earlier. He's picked back up his binging in '94 now. Bobby's replaced Jesse with Tony, and I'm just not feeling it. But I love Tony Schiavone in general. I think, he's fantastic. Another voice of my childhood growing up, whether it was WWF or WCW. And I do like his pay-per-view commentary here, but I'm with you on these house shows. But I feel like it's the house shows too, right? You gotta, some of these matches, they lumber, and you've got to try to fill the time with commentary. And, it's like a baseball game that's kind of boring. One of those, where those guys just start randomly talking about whatever nonsense. And I don't know if we ever get that in wrestling. So Tony is just trying to fill voids and these headlocks and these arm bars. And he's got Lord Alfred Hayes, God bless him, to feed off of here and things like that. But I think it's definitely a huge upgrade from Rod Trongard, who is now no longer with us. But as you pointed out, this episode of Boston, the Boston Garden Show, June 3rd, marks the final episode to air on the NESN sports network in Boston, which is unfortunate. Obviously, this one only goes back to 1985 when they started airing the Boston shows, but we've seen a lot of great matches. Just most recently, Hogan and Bossman in the cage. I think back to Savage defeating Tito for the Intercontinental title. All sorts of great matches here in Boston, and I was never so mad that they promote the next event here in July is featuring the Rougeaus and the Rockers and an Iron Team. Like, I don't remember if it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever. I was like, that close. We were that close to getting the Rockers and the Rougeaus in like an Iron Man style match on TV. Unfortunately, I've never seen any of those matches pop up.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, to me, it's just like the Rougeaus overall, one of my favorite heel tag teams around that time, even though they were not used particularly well in this point. But, I mean, I just think they were one of those great teams that were just kind of in the background when it comes to the Hearts and other tag Killer Bees, the Islanders. I mean, you can go even Strike Force. You can look back in '87, the MSC run that the Islanders and Strike Force had. I mean, the Rougeaus just kind of never really had that run. They either got put with somebody who
wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, people are like, why did they not give them the belts? I'm like, who do they beat for the belts? Look at all these teams where you've got to compete with the Hart Foundation and Demolition and all these great teams. And I'm not saying they didn't deserve it. Had they done this heel shtick a year before they did it, they would have probably handed them, here you go, we got no teams worth of shit right now. Well, a couple, but in general, we could use you. But the Rougeaus get that push. They make that heel turn. They start getting over. They're working with the Hart Foundation. And then within a matter of a month or two, the Brainbusters arrive. Now you're screwed. Then they turn the Powers of Pain heel, which nowhere near the level of Rougeaus wrestling-wise, but size-wise, Vince is going to push them. Then they decide to make Akeem and the Boss Man, a team. And it's like, now the Rougeaus were first for about a month. Now they're fourth by de facto. They're fourth in line for the titles right now as the heels go. And it's just wrong place, wrong time for them because they were a fantastic gimmick. They got it. They were amazing in the ring as heels. The heel tag team work between those two, just, I don't know that you could, it rivals pretty much any team you put out there. And I'll stand on that. Look at a couple more matches here. We've talked about the Twin Towers teaming up, working Demolition. That's been fun. They've been doing a little gimmick where Akeem's accidentally hitting the Boss Man, or Boss Man's accidentally hitting Akeem, and that's how they're taking the fall. And then the Twin Towers tease splitting up afterwards. And this is what I found interesting. We know in 1990, Boss Man can't be bribed. He's turning babyface. They see a star in the Boss Man. But here, they're teasing it because they see comedy gold in Akeem. So in these post-match arguments, they're kind of teasing Akeem going babyface, which would have gotten over. Not in the Boss Man sense of that guy's awesome, but it would have been very interesting to see Akeem. And I think maybe they also put the kibosh on that because enter the real Virgil, right? Enter the real Dream, if you will, in Dusty Rhodes.
Oh, yeah, no. But, I mean, what's the theme for babyface Akeem as opposed to Jive Soul Bro?
Oh, he's going to steal the theme. He's stealing the theme like the Young Stallion stole Crank It Up from Jimmy Hart. You got to have that theme.
Oh, Young Stallions. What a early Survivor Series, man. Crazy, crazy stuff.
Very, very interesting. Anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation, pal. Including, once again, they did it after WrestleMania 4. They do it again after WrestleMania 5. They separate the Hart Foundation. They never split up. They never have heat with each other. They just go into singles competition, yet continue to use the same theme music, continue to wear the same gear. And the Pink and Black attack, we know, will be back again here by the end of the summer. But they keep giving Bret an attempt to push the Hitman, and they're going to give him Mr. Perfect this time around, which is, I mean, just think about that. If you had told me as a kid, because I didn't see these matches, but if you had told me Bret Hart was wrestling Mr. Perfect before SummerSlam 91, I would have been like, wow, really? And they're doing 20-minute draws every night at the house shows right now. Mr. Perfect and Bret, and I know Bret's been on for years now, has been on search for a specific match from this era that he had with Hennig in Alaska. And he's been begging people, oh, has anybody got this match on handheld or whatever? I don't know if it was at a taping. I don't remember, but Bret's been dying to find. He calls that their greatest match or whatever, and he wants to get a hold of it. But it's from this era, of the 1989 ilk. I just watched the Boston match today. It was fine for what it was. It was Curt Hennig and Bret Hart. I mean, they didn't really go out there to steal the show either. But I mean, 20 minutes back in the day, signing these two together. Clearly, they had some kind of interest in Bret. They keep giving him that opportunity.
Yeah, he referenced it in his Hall of Fame speech. I remember that because I was in attendance in suburban Chicago. But I'm such a Bret Hart mark. I love Bret Hart. I absolutely will die on a hill that I love Bret Hart so much. And I mean, to me, it's funny. His matches with Kurt are blow away any matches that he had with Shawn Michaels, which is insane to me because I would have expected both, where it's just like, and I mean, I know this is Perfect with a back injury and, a little bit older, but for the most part, it's like Bret and Perfect really meshed well together, and it just made for magic. And it really is sad that we didn't get to see it till 1991. But to be honest, it probably in 1991 WWF, it was a breath of fresh air as opposed to what they were trotting out on the top of the card, as opposed to what they're trotting out with the top of the card now.
Well, I mean, we got Steamboat and Savage at WrestleMania 3. I didn't know what a classic was as a kid. I just knew what a good match, a really entertaining match was, and they moved at a different pace than we'd ever seen in New York. And that was an amazing match, and then it just lays there. We never get a match like that again, in my estimation, until SummerSlam 91, when Bret and Kurt go out there and basically give us the 90s version of Steamboat and Savage, my account anyway. As a kid, that's the way I looked at it. I knew I loved that match. I couldn't get enough of that match. Those guys, two of my favorites, especially Curt Hennig, but I had loved the Hart Foundation from the get too. So it's cool to see them back here in '89, even back, and of course both second generation guys, Bret with Stu, Kurt with Larry, and they got it, man, and they were having some bangers, as they say, even back in '80. Unfortunately, they're doing draws. Both guys are just kind of on the roster right now, unfortunately, but they're getting a feel for what they have in these guys. We know Hennig, they're going to really put something behind him by the fall, and his day will come. It's going to be a couple years off, and he's going to get the tag belts again in the meantime, but his day will come, as we know. And before we wrap things up, just a couple more things I want to hit on with you here, Matt. One of them being, I got to ask you your take on The Genius.
Oh, Lanny at this point was insufferable, but he was great. I mean, like you alluded to, the Saturday Night's Main Event match with Hogan, which is absolutely fantastic, and then, Perfect obviously breaking the belt. Well, at least Hogan didn't ball like Bob Backlund did in the early '80s when it came to that. But the Genius was hilarious. I mean,
he was dancing and singing in the bed. Absolutely.
I mean, probably closest to a gay character that we got post Adrian Adonis in a lot of ways, but also was his alliteration and everything else. I think he used whatever was the best of Leap and Lanny Poffo, and then just cranked it up and became a really great heel. And it's sad it only lasted for so long, and then obviously he kind of just goes away in 1990 a little bit, and then he kind of comes back in towards, you do have the infamous Oktoberfest episode of Saturday Night's Main Event where he does the sausage stuffing.
Yeah, he's the master sausage stuffer.
Yeah.
According to Mean Gene.
Yeah, exactly. And he did his comedy bits, I think, very well. Mm-hmm. And he obviously loses his hair in the next Royal Rumble. And then just kind of, I think after WrestleMania 6, he kind of just takes a back seat. And then, obviously he goes from, I think it was after WrestleMania 6, he goes to Heenan.
Yes, and thank goodness for that for Curt Hennig, and the Genius will eventually manage the Beverly Brothers, so he'll have that anyway.
And Jameson.
Jameson will be that'll be fun. That might be time to call the grenade raps. We call it quits when we get to the Jameson Genius feud of early '92. Yikes! But right now, man, there's one more match I want to touch on here with you. Specifically, jumps out to me. It's the headliner of the B shows, and that's the now Intercontinental Champion Ravishing Rick Rude versus the Ultimate Warrior. We know Rude stole the belt thanks to Bobby Heenan at WrestleMania 5. Warrior chasing him for said belt, going to chase him all the way into SummerSlam time. What was your take on these two at this point in time in their careers?
Well, at this point, it was the best Warrior feud I think he had up to this point. I mean, to me, he had just ran. You could tell they were building him up as time progressed, and then he won the Intercontinental title from Honky. I mean, that's at MSG, and what a better way to win a title by just completely obliterating the heel champion in 30 seconds. And it just clicked. I mean, Rude just bumped for him and made him look like just unbeatable. And it was great. I don't think the funny thing is their match at WrestleMania 5 and SummerSlam 89, I think, are their zenith. The next year where Rude gets a little bit of an edge, but I just don't. And to me, the Warrior title reign, you could have a whole series on that when it comes to that, because it's just, Hogan had the bigger angle with Earthquake, and it just felt like a secondary angle to put him and Rude in a cage, and then Rude jobs again, and then he kind of meanders till he leaves. But I mean, you couldn't do it any better for the Warrior on his ascension, because to me, him going up against Rude, that kind of elevated him more, and then the Warrior, obviously, in the next year, you're looking at going against the Golden Goose, which is Hulk Hogan.
That's right. And, man, that's a fantastic time, as I stated earlier, in regards to the Ultimate Warrior. But watching that ascension, the ascension of Rick Rude is happening quietly, though, because Rude comes in here. He's the first guy to make a passable match with the Ultimate Warrior, and he does it repeatedly, obviously, here in '89 and again in 1990. But also, Rude pretty much having a solid match with it. Jim Duggan just recently on Saturday Night's Main Event, and for as good as Duggan was once upon a time, his knees are shot, and he's really just kind of walks through his matches, even by this point in 1989. But he really had a very fun little match with Rick Rude on NBC, so I thought that was a really good job, Rick Rude. I don't think he was carrying Duggan through the match, but he certainly held his side up to make the match entertaining. So Rick Rude, not Rick Martel as I'm looking at him, I said Rick Rude was he was definitely working his own way up the ladder. At the same time, they were obviously Warriors going to get a bigger push, but Rude looking really credible in his reign as Intercontinental Champion now as we close up, I want to hit on for everybody listening out there, some of the other things happening in June. We've got the King Duggan Haku feud continuing on. Haku trying to regain his crown. Never going to happen. There's even tag matches with Duggan and Hillbilly Jim versus Andre and Haku. Glad I wasn't at any of those shows. Best I could find, Shane McMahon makes his referee debut here in a dark match. Mark Young pinning the Brooklyn Brawler with Shane McMahon as the referee. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that sticks out to me here before we close up shop, guys. Nothing of any merit. I know Tom McGee, basically Mega Man Tom McGee, finishing up here in the month of Vince, and that experiment is finally kaput. He's been trying it for years, and it's monotonous at this point, and so it's safe to say Tom McGee will not return finally to the company. And I guess before we wrap things up, I got to ask you, Rick Martel, the heel turn, Martel feuding with Tito, makes sense. He turned on him at WrestleMania, but were you a Rick Martel fan, a model fan?
Oh, absolutely. Rick Martel, it's funny, because Strikeforce was kind of, at first, they kind of got the glom from the Can-Am connection, because you could definitely see from probably WrestleMania 3 on and all the way through 87 until Zank just says, I've had enough, what they were going for with them. And then him and Tito kind of took it to where it needed to be, which is, I mean, it's insane around that time period where all the tag team talent that they had in late 87, even into 88, and them being the tag team champions, but rightfully went to Demolition, because Demolition was obviously, they were building them up pretty much from late 87 all the way till they won the tag straps, and then they just pretty much went through everybody in 88, obviously match with the Hearts and SummerSlam 88, and then the double turn that they really were great about explaining on the pay-per-view with Powers of Pain and Demolition, and then bringing in the Powers of Pain, which is another kind of head scratcher, because if y'all haven't listened to the other ship about the Hall of Fame induction of Demolition, I highly recommend you guys listen to it. Not to put myself over, but I was on it with myself and Drew and Jamie, and talking about how Demolition would work very, very well with big on big. In this case, it didn't work as well, but it would have been better than, let's just say, the Road Warriors if they were in that position. But getting back to the model, and I mean, I just think it was time, because Strikeforce had kind of just burned out, and Martel had been injured. So he's coming back, and you're like, okay, they're coming back. Why are we supposed to care? And then they come back, and then obviously he turns on it. But, you know, you have the lovely theme of the model, or as I jokingly call him, the model, and he was great. He was such an asshole heel, just a douchebag of any kind. He'd be like a guy who had all the money on Saturday night, and it's just like, and he had the hot girl, and you're just like, I fucking hate you, but you absolutely are who you are because you look the way you look. And Rick Martel was great. I mean, he stretched that out very good. I think he even got better in 1990 when he had the feud going into Jake into 90-91, and then he just kind of petered out after that. But loved him, Rick the Model Martel.
Yeah, later on with Buffalo Breath Tatanka and all that good stuff. But no, I was a giant Rick Martel guy. I loved the heel run. You know, the story goes that he told Vince, Vince begged him, come back. You know, he's at home taking care of his ill wife was what was really happening when they wrote him out with the injury. But Vince begging him to come back here. And he says, I'm not coming back unless you make me a heel. And Vince goes, Rick, you look at you. You're the most handsome guy. You can't be a heel. Rick had never really been a heel. And Rick said, I can do it, and I don't have any interest in coming back unless I get a heel run. And Vince says, all right, we'll give it a shot, and off to the races we go here in 1989. Right now, it's kind of weird because he's managed by Slick. You know, that's kind of a weird era for Rick because, I don't know, man, it's not clicking. But, you know Vince's logic at the time, unless you're Bad News Brown, if you're a heel, you have to have a manager. It's the rule of thumb during this era of the WWF. And right now the model has Slick. Later on, he'll be on his own. He doesn't really need his character doesn't really, the model character doesn't need a manager. Right now, Rick's still trying to find his way as a heel, but great matches with Tito, and I'm looking forward to seeing that feud seems to never end. They always rekindle it later on whenever they need to throw something out there. So it never really gets the proper send off, I don't feel like, but we'll follow that as we continue on to tell the story. Now, on the next episode of The Grenade, we got a listener out there by the name of Wes Kinley out of Winnipeg, Canada. And I'm going to read a little note from him about him attending a house show match here in Brandon, Manitoba on June 29th. And we'll talk about that at the start of the next show. I want to thank Wes for writing in. And I did not forget about you, sir. And we will definitely discuss your memories of being part of a live event. And if any of you out there have ever attended any of these events, have any real life memories, please send them my way. I'll be happy to read them here and put you over on the program. But for this week, guys, I want to thank first and foremost Matt Crowder for joining me, adding some really expert commentary of his fandom. And since Jesse Ventura impression has joined us, when I do Jesse, I kind of just do it half-assed. I could probably do it better than I do. But when I'm talking, it's like I'm just kind of half-assing Jesse to get to my next thing. But I love the fact that you can just do it without all the bullshit, man. So it really helps me out when I don't have to do it. And now we appreciate you being here, Matt. We'd love to have you back, man. And if there's anything you want to add at the end of the program here.
Well, Ray, thanks. This has been a long time coming for me. Like, I found you during the pandemic, and I really love the fact of all the work that you put in, and to be hands down the best WWF podcast out there, of any sort. And that's no slight on John McAdam, who I absolutely love and adore, and I've listened to for a long time as well. Not to put you over too much or literally go overboard, but support Ray, support his network. He's got some great shows. Even if you're not a WWF fan, there's lots of people that I'm lucky to call friends and am friendly with, and have been on other shows that are fantastic and are well worth your time. So it's a lot of fun. And in the immortal words of Jesse, the pleasure, of course, was all yours.
Very good, guys. Another edition of the Grenade in the Books. Matt, you are invited back down the road. We can do this again, my friend, as we get closer to SummerSlam and beyond. We hope to have you back, man. It's been a pleasure of mine to have, and I had a fantastic last 2 hours. We hope all the listeners out there did too. We'll be back soon with episode 200, hitting another milestone here on the Grenade. Thank you so much again, Matt.
You're welcome. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Superfly.